Again, I want to thank you for joining us today. My name is Suzanne Keever, and I'm a member of the NCSIS Professional Learning Consultants team. Wanda Jackson, another member of our team, and I will be walking you through how to use ad hoc reporting to review grading and set up honor roll reports today. I also want to give a quick shout out to several of the other teammates, my other teammates who are also here with us. They'll be keeping an eye on the Q&A and making sure your questions get answered. Just to let everyone know, we are recording this webinar and it will be made available as soon as possible. I hope everybody can see my screenshot. Can you guys see my screen? Okay. The presentation link is listed here on the screen for you to be able to open the presentation for yourself. We'll also have that in the chat. We also have the Q&A form and Q&A answers that we are making available in the chat as well. Please use those for any questions that you have, and we will all work on getting those answers for you as soon as possible. Today, I'm going to go ahead and go forward. On this honor roll and grading ad hoc reports, we've got our helpful links from our NCSIS knowledge base and a link to Eventbrite with the NCSIS events. So hopefully you use that to sign up for today, and hopefully you're going there regularly or following so that you're getting emails as we're adding new webinars and opportunities to join and get additional information. We also have the questions and answers linked here for you to get, and you should be able to see it in the chat as well. So for today, we're going to start out with an overview of ad hoc reporting, and then we're going to take a look at grade verification ad hocs and other reports to help with reviewing posted grades. And then Wanda Jackson is going to go over honor roll reporting ad hocs with you as well. So whenever you're navigating to your ad hoc reporting, you're going to click in the reporting area of the menu and then go under ad hoc reporting and you'll see filter designer. On this filter designer, I'm sure a lot of you have been creating these and have sit through a lot of information about it, but we're just going to touch base on a little bit of it again. Over on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see any reports that have already been published that you could click on them if you have access to be able to make some edits or to test or to run. And then in this to the right, you'll see an area where you can create new. Today, we're going to be focusing on Query Wizard and Pass-Through SQL Query, and we're going to be using the data type students. I have a link here on this slide to the Query Wizard and to the Pass-Through SQL queries that you can access to be able to get more information about both of these, but we'll be going over quite a lot of it today as well. Then once in the filter designer, you will see that you will give your query a name. Short description and long description might be necessary if you're sharing these reports with others so that they can see a description of what they're going to be looking at when they run the report. And then on this select categories and fields area, you have a spot here where you can filter by and you can put information into search. So if you entered student number, you have to be careful though not to put any spaces because sometimes the spaces will cause you to get no results back. So if you did enter something, some words with a space between them, say like last space name, and you didn't receive any results, then just close that space and try to search again. You also will see that you have these different categories, folders that have fields and more subcategories beneath them where you see the plus sign. Some that I think are really helpful with student data is demographics, school, if you're also trying to include school information in your filter. The learner area has a lot of good information. Census, of course, has your households and those things. Learner, just to mention, has programs and some of those areas there. And then as we're scrolling down here, you can see grading. And grading detail is in this grading category, and that's where we will be spending some time today looking at those filters. Then once you find the field you're searching for and you click on it, it then will populate the selected fields area. And then you can save and test to see the kind of information that you're pulling and add additional fields or remove fields by just using this arrow or clicking on the new filter, a new field to add. We also have a link here to the filter designer in Infinite Campus, which gives you step-by-step information. Then as we're moving forward, so from those selections of fields, we can click next, and then we go to a new area where we can select our filter parameters. And these are our filter operators. And if you look at this screenshot that we've included in the slide, you can see some of the filter parameters, operators that are available to us. But these can be different depending on which field which row you're on. So for instance, with an example like student active today, if I was to be able to click on that operator, I would see true or false, because that's whether you want it to pull the students that are active today or are not active today. And so you do see different operators depending on what those fields are. I have a link here to the field operators in Infinite Campus that will show you a list of these operators with the descriptions of those operators and then some examples of how you would use those. Then below the operators area, we have an area called logical expression. And this is an optional area. You are going to see that we use it some in the examples we're giving you today. But if you leave this box blank, then it's going to look up at this filter, the data area, and you have an ID for each one of these lines. So if this logical expression is blank, it is considering that the word and is between each one of these rows. So you're looking for students active today and whatever the operator is and the value the operator is, or the school number, school name, it's going to be putting these all together. So you're not going to be defining anything outside of what you've set up in your operators and values in the filter, the data area. But we will be using these some today when we want to use and, or we want to use or not, as we're looking at these different IDs and how we want it to populate our data. And then we're going to move on, which we could do by clicking next. But again, we recommend that you do save and test often. So once you've entered some of those filter operators, go ahead and save and test just to see if you're getting the information that you expect from the reporting. And then you can go back and tweak those if you need to, or also that logical box. Then as we go to the output formatting, so once you know you have the data that you want in your report, this is going to show you the different fields that you have included. And so there may be some of these that you were using so that you could use an operator to select a date or a date range or to choose active today. And you might not want to include those column headers in your report. So you can just uncheck the output sequence box for one of those. So if we didn't want to see active today in our report because we had selected in the operators that we just wanted to have the true active today students in our report, then we could just uncheck this output sequence and then we could save and test to see what that looked like in our report, to see if we were going to be happy with that. And I have a link here to the output formatting that is available in Infinite Campus, which gives you information about how these work with the sequence and sorting, with column headers. If you wanted to change the name of some of your column headers, you could, alignment, formatting, and the length of your headers and the filters and the rows and columns. So just so that you have that information there, you can click there to see more about that. Now we're going to look at review posting grades. So Infinite Campus itself already has a grades report, and this is located in the grading and standards in the menu, and you click on reports and then grades reports. Once you're looking at this report, you'll have an opportunity to select any grade levels you want to use, but you also have an area where you can select out of 3 different reports. 2 of those will be specifically helpful to reviewing and looking for missing grades. One of these is the All Grades and Scores report, and we're going to show you an example of this. This lists all the posted grades for a selected group of students, teachers, and the course sections that you've selected. And then you have your missing grades scores. This is where you're going to list grading tasks and standards that do not have a posted grade for an individual or selected group of teachers. And we have a link here to the grades report, grading and standards on the Infinite Campus website to help you look at that in more detail. But here is an example of what these reports look like. So when we're looking at the all grades and scores view, you can see here we have our school listed. Depending on what terms we selected, we may have just selected Q1, and then that's what would show here. We may have specifically selected just one grade level, or we may have included all grade levels at our school. And then you can see what your term date is, or term dates in this situation example that we're providing. And then you can see the teacher, the task, the information here below, and then under the terms you can see if there has been a grade or score posted, so that you can see that view by student. And then over on the right, we are showing you an example of the missing grade scores review by teacher. And this one, you can see that we also would do the same thing. We can select grade levels, we can select terms. And then when we see the courses here, we'll see that there are no grades listed. And so this will help us catch some of those that did not post. And the next area we're going to look at is grading ad hoc reports. So in Infinite Campus, they have a lot of pre-set up reports for us to use, which are great, but they also knew that we would need more. We would need to be able to customize some reports, and that's where we use our ad hoc reports. On this screen, we have some important fields that you'll use in this grading ad hocs. And so you can see, as we mentioned earlier on when we were looking at those selected filters, the categories and the fields that you could use for your report. You remember we mentioned grading, and so a lot of these that you see listed here are in the grading area. So that's where you would find these for your report. In our ad hoc do not delete folder at the state, we have 5 different ad hoc reports that will be very helpful to you. I've heard several of you mention a need for some of these. And we've got a link here that you can click on to be able to see these from the ad hoc reports, but we're also going to go over them in our presentation today. So we're going to talk about grades not posted, failure list, percent posted is blank, posted and in progress score mismatch. That's one I've heard a lot of people in my region asking about, because we had that in our previous system that we used. And then grade verification with comments. The first one we're looking at is grades not posted. And over on the left, we have the selected fields that you're going to use when you're creating this ad hoc. And we have these listed out for you. And again, you can see the prefix to be able to know which folder area these would be located in the categories. And then this next area that we have a screenshot for is our operators. So once you've moved on, after you've selected your fields and gone to next, then you're going to see your operators, and you can go in and select what you want to add here. We've already shared some examples of this, but you may want to alter that for something that you're using specifically. And just know we've got a note here. The screenshot we took is from 10/20/2024 was the last day of the Q1. And then that's what we have listed here with the roster end date. And then we also give you the information to put in your logical expression box. And so the way that I know we said that there's an and in between each one of these IDs. And in this logical expression, we have included an and. So we're looking at our ID 13, so that grading score. We're also looking at 18, the grading term name. We're adding those both in this, and then 19, which is the grading task. And then we're looking at 17 or 20. So looking at that roster end date or whether the roster end date is null. So just to give you an example of what this logical expression is looking at in this one. And then this next one is our failure list. And again, over on the left-hand side, we have the selected fields. And then as you move on to next, we can see that we also have that on our filter screen for the selecting the operators. And we've given you our recommendations for these operators. But again, you may choose to do something different depending on the output that you're needing, the results. And then we've got also a screenshot of the logical expression that we used over here to the right. And then the percent posted is blank. Again, we have the selected fields listed over on the left, and then on the right, we have your filtered operations where you can choose those operators. We do not have a logical expression on this one. And posted and in progress score mismatch, we have our selected fields over on the left, and then on the right, our filtered operations that we have here. And then we do have a note here for our grading term name and our grading task. You're going to set the term name and the task to your PSU names for these. Changes needed to compare different tasks or terms. So when you're looking at this grading term name, you're going to have the grade, the term that you are interested in pulling. So for this one, it's Q1. In your district, it may be a different name for that. And then same for the grading task. We've got term grade here. You might enter final grade there, or one of your other grading tasks. And then the grade verification with comments. We have our selected fields, and then this is our screen with our operators. And then you can see we have some specific values that we've pointed out here to help you run this report. But again, you may experiment with this to get other results depending on what you're looking for. And then I'm going to check to see if we have any questions that we need to answer before we move on to Wanda's section regarding the honor roll ad hocs.
Sure, Suzanne. We do have one question that was a great question. They asked about the ad hoc fields, and they asked about the start date and the end date for the roster. So roster.start date and roster.end date, because those are kind of difficult to find and they're in a different area. So those fields are actually found under student and then under learner and then under schedule. And so that's where those fields are. They're a little different than the grading fields that we've seen in all the other pieces. Basically we're out of the grading, but those roster ones are again under student, learner, and then schedule. But that's the only question we had.
Great. Thank you, Erin. Well, Wanda, I'm going to turn it over to you, but I'm going to drive, so I'll do my very best, but you let me know, give me some marching orders if I miss moving forward.
Okay, just keep it between the lines. We'll be good.
Okay.
All right. So thank you, Suzanne. So I am Wanda Jackson. So, and my disclaimer is I am not a SQL expert. I can understand the code, and I'm going to do my best to try to explain it to you in a way that makes sense to me, and hopefully that will make sense to you. So we're going to kind of look at this today. So we are doing a SQL pass-through query. So when you go to, we're going to be still in reporting, ad hoc reporting, and filter designer. We do have a link there to our knowledge base article on honor roll. So it has a lot of the same information. So you might like to look at it in that format rather than looking at it on the slide deck that we have shared. But it is there for you to be able to, might be able to access that quicker sometimes than trying to find the presentation that we shared. So just know that that is there and available to you. So on our filter designer, we are hop back one slide, Suzanne. So you do want to make sure that you pick the pass-through SQL query type, and you're going to pick the data type is going to be student. So on our next slide, you're going to see that our pass-through SQL has kind of two parts. When you click that, it's going to open up a box that has two different parts. So this top part is box 1, and the next one where it says where 1 equals 1, which kind of makes sense, that's going to be box 2. So on our next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about box 1. So you're going to see some hard-coded data there, and that's actually the beginning of your SQL query. And we do have the code. So, you know, I said I didn't know SQL code. You don't have to come up with code by yourself. We have this where you can just copy and paste it into each of the boxes, and we have that labeled for you. So just know that this first statement here, this first box tells you select distinct. So which that means is no matter how many times a student has an A on the A honor roll report, that is going to limit it to it just being returned, that student being returned once. So it's going to look at all the data in our student table. So box 2 on the next slide, it also has some hard-coded data there, and that's telling the SIS where it's going to look for this information. So it's going to search for our students in the calendar and structure that that you have in your context. And that white box below it is where you're going to copy and paste the part of the code that says box 2. So now we're going to just look at a few terms, SQL terms that you'll probably hear me say while we're looking through this stuff. So we're looking through our code. So alias is just a shortened name for term. Select is going to tell you which records it's going to return, and distinct already mentioned, it's only going to return one unique record, even if more than one exists. So your inner join and left outer join statements, that's just how it's going to match our criteria. So our inner join combines rows from different tables, and then our left outer join kind of says, I want you to pull the return the data on this left-hand side where it matches the records in the other. Our where and on statements is just kind of setting our criteria selections, and our and or is telling us how we're going to apply those conditions. So our end statement there is our list. So you'll see when we start looking at our code, that end statement is going to be where we list all our grades that we want to return for the A or AB honor roll. So here is your code. So you can see that we have it listed there, copied to box 1. So all you're going to do is highlight all of that data, starting with the inner join statement and copying down, and copy that and paste it into box 1. And then in box 2, you see where it says copy to box 2, you're just going to copy that one line of code there into box 2. So we're going to go on and kind of look at what all those statements mean. And again, I'm just going to try to give you an overview. I'm not teaching you how to code by any means, because I'm not qualified to do that. So we're going to look here. Our first statement is kind of just telling us that it's going to look at our student table, and it's going to look at our term schedule table. So it's looking at our student table and pulling all the data from that schedule table, which is our main quarter table, and we're going to pull all of that data together. So our next slide is going to limit it down just a little bit more. So it's telling us that the t.sequence or t.seq equals 1 tells us that we're just going to look at term 1. So knowing that we might need to set up a separate ad hoc report for each term, you might want to set that up. So have an A honor roll for term 1, an A honor roll code for term 2. If you go ahead and you save all of those and save that to your user group folder, your data managers won't have to make all of those changes. So best practices is go ahead and set one up for each term. If you have 6 terms, you might have 6 honor roll reports that you'll save in those user groups. So just to save a little bit of time there, and so you won't be changing the code constantly. So If you do need to set one up for term 2, you're going to set that T dot sequence equals 1. You're going to make that T dot sequence equals 2. So whichever quarter or whichever term you want to pull, make sure that you pull the correct sequence, and you can tell the sequence number there if you need to by your term table or your term setup. So our next slide, we're also going to narrow it down a little bit more. So we're going to look at our grading tasks. So we're telling it here that we need to look at the data in our grading task, right? This code is looking for our term grade. So we are pulling term grade in our first term. Now you might want to pull semester grades. So if you want to pull your A honor roll based on your semester grade, you would need to change where we have term grade here. You need to change that to your grading task name. If it's called semester grade, then you set that up as semester grade. What you do need to keep in mind is where that grading task falls, because you need to make sure you match that grading task to that sequence number. So if your semester grade is in term 2, you need to make sure that that term sequence is also set to equal 2. So keep that in mind, that those need to match, where if you're pulling final grades and you're looking for final grades in term 4, you need to make sure that that sequence is term 4. Or if your final grades are in term 6, make sure you set that sequence to equal 6. All right, Suzanne. So now is when we're telling our system what we want to pull. So this is where that end statement is. So we have our list of grades here that are normally considered what would qualify a student to be on the A honor roll. So you can see in our list, we have our 100 to 90, and then we have P for passing and S for satisfactory. So if you have a score group that has ESNNU and your E qualifies as an A honor roll, you probably need to add another part in this end statement here to include that E in there, so that that will be recognized by the system as a qualifying score for your A honor roll. So you can customize that how you need to customize it. Do keep in mind that this is pulling posted grades. So this is the school grading score contains all of your posted grades for each student. So make sure that you customize that however you need to. You can see our grading score there is pulling all of our information on the screenshot there. So in our next slide, what this slide is doing is we need to look at all of our non-qualifying scores as well. So this not statement where it says and not gx.score, these are all of our non-qualifying scores, because we need to make sure that even though a student came back to us on that list, in the first one, that they might have some A's, but they also might have those 55s and 71s there. So we need to be able to pull that as well. So that's where this code here is telling our system to do, is to look at those non-qualifying scores as well. And ultimately, it's going to just return those ones on the left-hand side that is qualifying, and the scores in the other one is null. So on our next slide, here's just a representation of, we've got all our A scores that we told it pull first, and our GX score is where it's pulling all of our scores that were not in that list. And as we continue on through our code, this gives us our representation of what this kind of doing in the background. So it's looking at student 1, 2, 3, 4 there. It had, this student had some A's, but they also had some non-qualifying scores. So they had some 88s that weren't in our list. So our student, the 5, 6, 7, 8 student had A's, but they had null values in those non-qualifying score in that list. So that is what we are really looking for. So we want students that are only have A's and none of the non-qualifying scores. So when we go to our next slide, so in box 2, we copied where GX score ID equals or is null, and that is exactly what it is returned to us. So you can see that student 5, 6, 7, 8 down at the bottom has all the A values, has null values for all of those non-qualifying scores. And our code returns one distinct value, even though our student is listed there 3 times, but it only returns it once. So that 5678 is the only student right now that qualifies for our A honor roll. So we'll go on to the AB, but do we have any questions so far, Erin, on the A part?
We do. First, I'm going to go back for just a minute. There was a question about one of the fields, and I just want to clarify. You actually said this when you were going through, but I just wanted to say it again. They asked about the grades, the actual fields for the grades, and which ones would be the return. So in other words, your grading.score field is a posted grade, and your grading.progress score is an in-progress grade. So just to differentiate between the two, which you did a little bit earlier, but I wanted to call that out again. Also a clarification about whether or not the ad hoc reports that Suzanne went over, are they already in the system for us or not? And no, they are not there, but the link in the presentation, and I also put it in the Q&A, will take you to the document that shows you how to set those up. And the last question we had, which I'm in the process of answering right now, but I'll go ahead and say it, is do we need to do the A honor roll setup at each school or at the PSU level? And so if your schools have the same criteria for the A honor roll, so in other words, they have the same names for their grading task, they have the same scores that gives them an A honor roll place, then yeah, you can only do it once. So you just have one ad hoc that's called A honor roll, and it will return values based on the context that is selected in the upper right hand corner, just like any other ad hoc that you actually run. So you do not have to create it more than once, but if you have different schools, so maybe your elementary schools have some scores that might qualify them for an A honor roll that maybe your high schools don't have. I'm thinking about SNU, for example. You may have to have a separate A honor roll for your elementary schools versus your high schools. So, and that is all the questions that we have at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll look at our AB honor roll now. So we have a breakdown here. So this is your code. So it is a little bit longer because it's a little bit more complicated, but there's not a lot more to it. But so you can see on this first slide, there's a portion that you copy into box 1, and it continues onto the second slide here. So you'll continue copying that down until you reach the box 2. So you'll copy that first part into box 1, and then you'll copy that last statement there into box 2. So we'll go on and look at the breakdown. And again, it's very similar to the A honor roll until we get to a certain part. So again, here is just pulling all of our data from our student table and our term schedule table. And then we continue on. And again, we're looking at our term 1 in this example. And again, that's where you need to change it if you want to pull, you know, if you have 6 terms, you might need to pull a different term here. So just keep in mind that that is where you need to change that 1 to reflect which term you want to pull. So our next slide, again, will show us our term grade. So that is what we're doing in this example. Again, you can customize it how you need to. Just keep in mind to make sure you match up where that final grade is going to fall. So if you're pulling final grade, which term you want to pull that final grade in a term sequence. So our next slide is where we start seeing a little bit of difference here. So you can see here that we're looking at our grading score, but this time we need to look at all our end statement has a list of all our A qualifying scores and all of our B qualifying scores. And again, if you have a different score group where you need to add in or customize those lines, make sure that you do that so you can personalize it for your PSU. So on our next slide, so that previous slide pulled all of our A's and B's, so all those students that have that. But again, this instance, we need to look at all our students' non-qualifying scores, because even though they may have an A's and all A's and B's, they might also have some C's and D's. So we need to make sure we pull all of our scores so that our code can look at that and compare everything and make sure we're returning the correct data. So here it is looking for that and not statement. Our GX scores are looking for all of our non-qualifying scores. So our next slide. You can see our list here. That GX is all of our non-qualifying scores. If you look down at the bottom there, you can see student 5432 on the left-hand side that has that 88, but he also has some non-qualifying scores. So that's why we need to make sure that we include that code in there so that we can look at all of those scores. So in our next slide, again, you see here where it's returned null values for those students that didn't have any of the non-qualifying scores. And again, you can see our student 5432 had some qualifying scores and he had some non-qualifying scores. So our left outer join statement there is comparing all of this data for us and only going to return the data that we need. So our next slide. We introduce another part for our AB code. So this is our extra little value here. So our G3 score here, it is pulling only our B qualifying or our B scores. So essentially what it's doing is saying, okay, now just pull all the students that have Bs that are in this list here in our end statement. So what it's ultimately going to do is saying, I want all of my students that had A's and B's, but I want it to return only the students that didn't have any A. So it makes the system look for students that at least has one B, because we already pulled all of our straight A students. So this part of the code here is just looking for students that has at least one B score that's in that G3 list and essentially excludes all of those students that had straight A's. So we don't want to modify that G3 score because we want to make sure that that is looking for those students that at least had one B there. So if we continue on to our next slide. So this is kind of just another representation of that you can see the students that had the A's and B's, they had no non-qualifying scores in the GX column there. And then the G3 column is where they had at least one B. So when we go to the next slide, our ultimate results, remember in box 2, we told it that we wanted it to only return values that our GX score, which that's the non-qualifying scores. We only wanted to return those that had null values in those non-qualifying scores. So you can see it returned our student 1234 and our student 9876 who had those null values for non-qualifying scores. So this is the students that are on our AB honor roll. So our next slide has a little bit of information about how you can personalize and customize these honor rolls. So your scores that are valid for your honor rolls are in those end statements, your G and your GX statements. So as I said earlier, if you have an E, S, N, and U, if that E qualifies, then you need to add that in or whatever setup that your PSU has for your honor roll qualifications. In our district, we had a superintendent's list, and that was all students that had 97s and above. So I had to create a third set of honor roll reports that included only those grades. My end statement had the example there that had all 97s and above for those grades. So if you have extra or additional criteria for different honor rolls that your students meet for your district, you might need to add another set of honor roll reports, and you can customize those however you need to. Just a reminder though, in that AB honor roll report, don't modify that G3 because that might throw your data off. So I do want to say that we have given you the code, but please still validate your data when you pull these. Go ahead and check and make sure that it's pulling it however you want it to, especially if you modify it. If you add something else in, make sure that you're validating that data to make sure it's pulling your data correctly and giving the correct honor roll students. So to adjust your terms, remember you need to adjust that T.SEQ statement to equal whichever term that you're trying to pull, whether it be 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Make sure that if you need to pull a different grading task, if you want to pull semester grade instead of term grade, you change that to that K.name to equal whichever grading task you want. And again, make sure you're matching that to the sequence, your term sequence, where that grading task falls. So these last two are just a little bit of modification you can make to box 2 to customize your output data a little bit. So the way that it was coded in the examples above, that is pulling all students. If you want to pull only your active students and exclude all of your inactive students, then add this and student.endDate is null statement in box 2, and that will only pull your active students. If you want to customize your export so that you don't have to sort it in alphabetical order and grade level and all of that, you can add this additional order by statement that we have there as an example, and that's going to order it by grade, then by student's last name and first name. So just a little bit of customization you can add into box 2. And we have some resources here that we've put together, some quick links so that you don't have to go scrolling through the presentation to find your links. There's the link to our knowledge base article and some of the other links that we provided so that you can have those all in one spot. And I'll pause to see, Erin, do we have any additional questions?
We do. And now we've gotten to the hard questions.
Okay.
So we knew it would happen at some point.
Right.
But yes, so what we're finding is, and we knew this, everybody across the state has very different criteria for honor roll. And sometimes you do things in a certain way. So there's several different scenarios. If you go look at the answer document, you can see several different scenarios that people have brought up. One of them is if you have 9-week or quarter classes that were posted as your final grade rather than as a term grade, and kind of putting those together. Another one is a district, when they have their A-B honor roll, they don't include students who have all Bs. You must have at least one A to be on the A-B honor roll. Another one was they have some non-reporting course codes that receive grades that they did not want to include in their actual honor roll calculations. Also year-long and semester classes, and trying to combine those together. So all of those are different scenarios that honestly we don't have answers for. So as Wanda mentioned earlier, none of us are professional SQL writers, and so we have been kind of playing around with those options to see whether or not we can. I did put in the answers to just reach out to your professional learning consultant. Not that we're going to know the answer, but if we have heard of someone else having the answer, then we can at least help pass that along. And if you at your district or your PSU have found an answer to some of these questions, please reach out to your professional learning consultant so then we can turn around and share with others. So together, maybe we can solve some of these more difficult problems that we don't have an answer to yet. So I think that is all of them. We did have just one come in that was really more of a request. So about building those ad hocs and maybe sharing them out. So we'll take that back as a request, but I think that's all the questions we have right now.
Okay. Well, we probably have given you a few minutes back to your day, because I think this was scheduled for a little bit longer, but hopefully you got all the information that you needed. We would love to have your feedback. Again, please, if you think of some more questions, drop those in the Q&A. Please fill out our feedback. We do look at those, we do discuss them, and we just try to work to give you what you need. If we need to present it in a different format, we do use that feedback. So we do greatly appreciate it when you do give us the feedback. So yes, this is going to be, I see in the chat, it has been recorded and it will be shared when the recording is ready. So we thank you for being here today. And again, if you have questions, please reach out to your professional learning consultant, and we will be glad to help you however much we can. So thank you for joining us today.